Hey, Frank and Arlo. Today I'm going to do video number 4 in the Building and Using a Fascinating Vocabulary series. And the title of this one is Them's Fightin' Words and Fistfights That I Have Survived. So I figured if I was going to teach you some fighting words, then I might as well tell you about some fights that I got into when I was young. I haven't been in any in a long time, trust me. The first 3 videos were about, number 1, keeping a commonplace book. Number 2, vocabulary necessary for mostly civil discourse. And then number 3, vocabulary necessary when it becomes uncivil discourse and you need to get in somebody's face. This one is the next in the series about what happens when you go to blows. Now, once again, I use dictionary.com and the Online Etymology Dictionary. I've always been a lover, not a fighter, but sometimes stuff goes down and you can't get out of it and you find yourself in a fight. And over my life, I've had to put up my dukes more than a few times. Now, this is definitely not a set of vocabulary words that you want to use while you're in a fight. So, like, if you say, oh, you're trying to get me into a kerfuffle to some guy who thinks that trading punches on the street with another human being is a legitimate way to solve some sort of a perceived injustice to them. Because that's what it usually is. I can't believe you did this. And a lot of times it's just BS. Well, if you use words like kerfuffle and Donnybrook, you're going to piss them off. And they're going to beat you even harder. And hopefully neither of you are going to be street fighters or boxers or anything like that. Well, let's get started. The first school that I went to was the Horatio B. Hackett School at Savannah, New York, in Philadelphia, which actually when I went there, I didn't live across the street from it. But then later on, when I was 13 years old, we bought a house at 2176 East York Street, which was right across the street, kind of catty corner to the Hackett School that I went to, which burned down, and then there was a newer Hackett School that was put up across the street from there, where there was a factory that had also burnt down. A lot of stuff used to burn to the ground when I was a kid. There were a lot of places that they were brick or rock buildings, but they had a lot of wood in them, and things were different back then. People would die all the time in house fires and things that usually don't happen very often. You really have to go out of your way to set a house on fire that's a modern house. But anyway, all that's beside the point. So the first person I want to talk about today is a guy named Richie Patchell. Richie Patchell, when I was a little kid, he was in our school. I didn't know where he lived or anything. He wasn't a kid that like I hung out with after school or, had a mom in the PTA. Like my mom was in the PTA, so I knew the other kids whose moms were in the PTA. He wasn't in Cub Scouts or anything else like that we were in. But he was twice as big as us. He was a tall, skinny guy. And he had an eye that looked like maybe there was something, he had had surgery or something done to it. And he was a scary guy. He was a tough guy. And he would beat somebody up at the drop of a hat. So what he did is he had somebody go around in the schoolyard and draw unsuspecting playmates into an imbroglio. That's our first word. And an imbroglio is a misunderstanding, disagreement, etc., of a complicated or bitter nation as between two persons or two nations. It's also a confused heap. But this, we're going to do the misunderstanding of a bitter nature. So what he had the kid do was go around the schoolyard and go, "Oh man, you want to hear something funny? Go up and ask Richie Patchell what happened to his mom when she was baking brownies." And so I guess I wasn't the brightest bulb in the pack. I didn't see anything coming. I went up and I was like, "Hey, Richie." "Yeah, what?" I said, "What happened to your mom when she was baking brownies?" Well, he went, "That's not funny. My mom died when she was making brownies, and I'm gonna kick your ass." And he proceeded to do that. He gave me a beat down. And that's our next word. A beat down is a violent physical beating. An emphatic or overwhelming defeat. And both of those were appropriate for what happened to me. He beat me to a pulp. So another tough kid in the school was a kid named Billy McKean. And I started making friends with the tough guys. So Billy McKean became a friend of mine. And he was tough. He was a left-hander. And people don't want to fight left-handers because there aren't as many left-handers as right-handers. And they don't know how to approach them because their weak hand and their strong hand are the opposite. So if they're used to fighting right-handers, they call them southpaws. So they can be sneaky. But Billy didn't need to be sneaky. He was just tough. And my mom used to call him ears. His ears weren't real big, but they did stick out a little bit. But I remember one time that there was a hullabaloo in the schoolyard. And that's our next word. A hullabaloo is a clamorous noise or disturbance, an uproar. And the teacher, who was this little lady, now I remember in first grade we had Miss High and Miss Little. It might have been Mrs. High and Miss Little. And Miss High was big and chubby, and Miss Little was little. So they had kind of, like Miss High was higher than Miss Little, and Miss Little was literal than Miss High, littler. And it might have been Miss Little, but it was like a diminutive-sized lady that came up and picked him up by his ears. Now, don't try this at home. I can't imagine what it would feel like if somebody picked me up by the ears. I would think that my ears would just rip off, that my body would rip away from my ears. But he was screaming, and he wasn't a kid that screamed a lot. I mean, he kicked some butt. So I hung out with people like him, and I wound up, I could help them with their homework and stuff like that. Although I wasn't the greatest student in the world either. But I could help these guys, and they liked me, and I liked them. And so I didn't have to get in any more fights at Hackett. But then I went on to Penn Treaty Junior High School. I had to walk to school. There wasn't like school buses back then. You either walked to school or you took public transportation. Maybe there were some people whose parents drove them to school, but I don't remember any of that stuff. I was there for 7th and 8th grade, and there were 2 Jewish kids that were in my class. I don't think they were there at the same time. I think one was 7th and one was 8th. But they were like the exact opposite. There was a guy named Jeff Rosenblum. He was not a fighter. I don't know where he was from. He was a nice guy, very gentle, very good student. And we were in something called 7-1, that's supposedly the top of the academic classes, but whatever. This kid was in there. But then there was another kid named Mark Rubin. And Mark Rubin, his dad was a guy named Diamond Irv, who owned Diamond Irv's Pizza at 2nd and Diamond Street. So he was Irv Rubin, and he lived on Diamond Street, so he was Diamond Irv, and he owned a pizza parlor. So you had to go through, like, the little bit of Fishtown right there along Girard Avenue, leaving school, and then through a fairly significant black neighborhood. And Mark Rubin walked home. Nobody else lived out there. And he walked home, and he fought his way through several kerfuffles every day to get home. And that's our next word. A kerfuffle is a fuss or a commotion. And so he would be walking along, and all of a sudden there'd be this fake, like, commotion that would happen. And, oh, what are you doing, man? Or, we told you not to walk through our neighborhood. Some kind of stuff. It's like, I gotta walk through your neighborhood. But he became tough as nails. And he would wallop each comer one at a time. And wallop is our next word. It means to beat soundly or to thrash, to strike with a vigorous blow, to belt or sock. And he was an amazing guy. He taught me one time. He's like, yeah, well, you want to be able, listen, he used a pejorative term for black people, and I'm not going to use that. But he told me, like, if you want to fight them, don't ever hit him in the head. Hit him in the chest. And one time I saw him fight a guy, and he did. And he like pounded his chest, and the guy went down. He said, yeah, that. I don't know. I guess if he pounded a white guy in his chest, he'd get down too. But anyway, moving on. I had a girlfriend, quote unquote girlfriend. Just, 7th, 8th grade. Your relationships are not really deep. And she was my girlfriend for a very short time. This is why. I was walking through the neighborhood on my way to her house, and she lived kind of off of Trenton Avenue on the other side of these railroad tracks that a railroad never went down, but they ran along Frankfort, and Frankfort kind of intersected Trenton, and you'd walk across there and down Trenton Avenue, and she lived off to the right there. And as I was walking over to her house, some local ruffian came up and started a brouhaha with me. So what is a brouhaha? It's an excited public interest discussion or the like as the clamor attending some sensational event like a hullabaloo. But this is the one that is the best description. An episode involving excitement, confusion, turmoil, etc., especially a broil over a minor or ridiculous cause. And I don't know what the minor or ridiculous cause was, but this guy came up with some kind of a pretense to start a fight with me, and then he beat the snot out of me. My face was all messed up, and my clothes were all messed up and everything. Well, I was on my way to Kathy's house, and she expected me to be there, so I kept going. showed up, and I knew that she was pretty tough, and she could fight. She could fight with the boys and win a lot of times. And she said, what happened? And I told her, and I said, this guy clobbered me. And clobber is the next word, and that's to batter severely, to strike heavily, to defeat decisively, to drub or to trounce. And then another one which doesn't, here is to denounce or criticize vigorously, although he probably did that. And she said, well, who was it? And I told her the kid. And she went, okay, come with me. So I started following her. She went over to this kid's house. She knocked on the door. The kid came to the door. She said, get out here. He came out, and she beat him up. Like, just beat him. Beat him silly. And I went, hey, thanks a lot. I was a little bit embarrassed, but I said, thanks a lot. And she said, now I'm breaking up with you. I said, breaking up with me? Why? She said, well, I don't want to go out with somebody who can't fight his own battles. So goodbye. And she turned around and walked out of my life. I don't think I ever saw her after that. Then in 9th grade, I started to go to Central High School. In Philadelphia, you go to junior high school, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And most high schools start in 10th, 11th, and 12th. But Central was a 4-year high school. And you had to apply to get in, and I got in. I didn't really like it. I wasn't an academic kind of dude, but I got in, and I went there. It was a long commute. You could take various buses and trolleys and subway, the elevated. You could take all kinds of things to get to school. And I used to have the same class schedule as my friend Steve Grunbaum. And Steven and I would take, sometimes we get on the 25 bus to Girard Avenue, then we get on the L and we get off at 15th and Market. We'd go over to the Broad Street subway and we'd take that up to Olney, the Olney station, and get off there and walk to school. But you could get on that subway and get off at any stop and take something that would take you east and then get on the L or another bus or something. So we tried to figure out all these different ways to go home, which was fun. It was adventurous, but sometimes it led us through some really bad neighborhoods. So one day we got off at Susquehanna and Dauphin, I think is the name of the stop, of the Broad Street subway, and got on the 39 bus, which was going east on Dauphin Street. We got to around 10th Street. Very black neighborhood. You know, it's not like you saw white people walking around there. And I had a Central High School jacket on. I was leaning up against a window, and next to me, Steven was talking to me, and he had his window open, and he was, you know, I'm over here. Steven's talking to me. When he got his arm out the window, and there was a gang on the corner, and all of a sudden, this one kid ran up, and went bam, and stabbed Steven in his arm. And he went like, oh, I'm stabbed. So the bus driver pulled the bus over at the next corner. So we were a block away from where these kids were hanging out. And he goes, well, there's a payphone over there, so you guys can just go over and call the police, and they'll take you to Temple Hospital. And I went, there's no way we're getting off this bus. You're either taking us to the hospital, or you're waiting here while the police come. So he agreed to do that. And I went over and called the police, and they came. The rescue came and took Stephen to Temple Hospital. And I remember that I had to call his mom, because the people asked. I mean, we were teenagers, but the people asked, you want us to call the mom? And I said, well, no, I'll call her. So I call her up. I'm like, Mrs. Gruenbaum, listen, everything's all right, but Stephen got stabbed. And she went, where? Stupid me. I went, on the 39 bus. She went, no, you idiot. Where? Where on his body did he get stabbed? I said, oh, in his arm, but he's okay. So the next thing you know, the Gruenbaum family was there, and that wasn't really a fight, but it was an interesting happening on the way home from school. And I didn't really get in any fights while I was at Central. But then after 2 years, I transferred and went to Frankfurt High School, which was not my neighborhood high school. We got into it, they got me into it, my parents got me into it, because they were politically connected and somebody pulled some strings and they let me go in. So I really didn't know anybody there. I was the new guy. And I had to, meet people. I'm not good at meeting people. I'm an introvert. So it took me a while to do that. But there were some people from my neighborhood that went there. And I wound up finding out, oh, this guy's from my neighborhood. You'd see people with a Frankfurt jacket on, the L on the way and go, hey, where are you from? And so I met this guy named Joey George. Joey George was the toughest guy I ever met. The last time I saw him, we were both Philadelphia police officers, and we had a laugh over that because, I was we were buddies for a while, and I was kind of the wussy, the hippie flower child, and he was the tough, nuts and bolts kind of guy. He had been, I think, a Golden Gloves boxer, but he was some sort of a boxer. He boxed, not professionally, but he was an amateur boxer. And he was the best pugilist that I've ever known. And that's our next word. And a pugilist is a boxer, especially a professional one. So, but I lived in the neighborhood. My buddy Steven lived around the corner from me. And I didn't hang out with Joey George all the time. And this actually probably happened before I hung out with him a lot. And we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But one night, Stephen and I went over to Cumberland Avenue, past his church, which is a Lutheran church over there. I forget the name of it. And we went to see these girls. So these guys came up and asked us where we were going. And they were all dressed alike. They had white T-shirts on, blue jeans, and an afro comb. And I think they all had them in the right back pocket, sticking out. They were white guys. And it was obvious that they were a gang, and they thought they were tough guys, and I guess they were tough guys. And we told them what they were doing. Well, apparently one of them liked the one girl. So quickly a dust-up ensued. Now, what's a dust-up? It's a quarrel, an argument, or a row. And that quickly escalated into a fracas or a fracas. I say fracas, but some people say fracas. And that's a noisy, disorderly disturbance or fight, a riotous brawl and uproar. Well, I was jumped by several of the guys. I don't know what happened to Stephen. Maybe he got away. I forget. I just know what happened to me because it was horrible. And they bludgeoned me with their fists and their shoes. Now, what's it mean to bludgeon somebody? Well, a bludgeon is a short, heavy club with one end weighted or thicker and heavier than the other. So, like a blackjack would be a bludgeon. But, so if you take that and you hit somebody with it, it's to bludgeon them, to knock them down with this thing, to hit them with this thing. Well, the bludgeon that they used were their bare fists and their shoes. And they really did a number on me. My left eye was completely closed and all puffed up. I felt like Rocky. Well, this is before the Rocky movies. But Rocky, when he's in the corner and his eyes all puffed up, and he's got like, cut me. But I wasn't yelling, cut me to anybody. But that's what it looked like. If you ever see the movie Rocky, where his eyes shut, it's been bludgeoned so much by the fist of the other, whichever opponent it was that time, Apollo, Creed, whatever. That's what I looked like. And my upper lip on the left side hung all the way down to the bottom of my chin. I could go like, and it would flap. I didn't do that because it was excruciatingly painful. And I was going home. I think my parents were at my grandparents on Survivor Street that night. I was on my way over there, and I happened to run into Joey George. And he was like, "What happened to you, Bean? What happened to you?" So I told him, and he said, "Come with me." Well, we went back to the scene of the crime, and he told him, "I don't want any of you running, because I'll hunt you down, and you're going to have to just take it now." And these guys stood for this. One at a time, they went up and tried to fight him, and he just kicked ass. Then another time, me and Joey, his name was Raymond Joseph George, so every once in a while I might slip and call him Ray, because that's what his girlfriend called him. We were on the Frankfurt L. We were on the southbound side. I don't know where we were going, probably downtown to do something. And we were confronted by these two black guys. And a skirmish quickly broke out. What's a skirmish? It's a fight between small bodies of troops, especially advanced or outlying detachments of opposing armies. But in a general use, it's any brisk conflict or encounter. And that skirmish quickly deteriorated into an all-out Donnybrook. What's a Donnybrook? It's an inordinately wild fight or contentious dispute, brawl, a free-for-all. So what was going on? It was 2-on-2, but it was really 1-on-1. Joe and this one guy, they were boxing. And the guy seemed like he was pretty good. But Joe was quickly beating his ass. And while that was going on, the other guy, who was bigger than me, because back then a lot of people were bigger than me, he was slowly punching me down the steps. I'm trying to stay up there and trying to get a punch in, and he's going boom, 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 and hit me down. So Joey finished his guy, and then he came down, and he grabbed my guy, and he finished him. And back then there was like honor among thieves, I guess you call it, where, okay, I lost, so I'm not going to go down and jump this guy. So we didn't have to fight him, you know. So he just beat the one guy, came down, beat my guy. Now, around this time, Joey was dating this girl named Marguerite Kamisic. And Marguerite introduced me to her friend named Jackie Salstein. Real nice girls. And I dated Jackie for a while. And we would do double dates quite often. I think by this time I had a car, and Ray had a car, but we, you know, sometimes I would just go out with Jackie, and sometimes we would go go out together. But then there were times when you didn't have it. If your car was broke down or something, then we'd always just go out together. So we went to this diner. They lived in, I forget the name of the neighborhood. It's off of Erie Avenue near the Erie Diner. But I don't think we were at the Erie Diner. We were at the this is the neighborhood where my niece Lisa's husband is from. Because I remember going out there to some kind of event and going, this is near where Jackie Solstein lived. And we went to this diner, and we're sitting there, and Marguerite went like, oh no, guess who just walked in? My ex-boyfriend Joe. So I'm looking over, and Joe's looking over at Marguerite. And Joey George is sitting there, and he slowly turns around and starts looking at Joe, and just like walked up to him and said, let's get this over with. And Marguerite's going like, no, don't fight. Jackie was like me. She was a lover, not a fighter. And it's like, oh no, what's going on? So we wind up going outside, and words were exchanged, and then they started brawling. Now, brawling is an angry, rough, noisy fight, especially one engaged in under the influence of alcohol. And trust me, there was alcohol involved that night. It's also to engage in angry, rough, noisy fighting, especially while under the influence of alcohol. So the first one was a noun and the second one's a verb. This guy Joe was tough. This was actually a boxing match. The fight lasted for several minutes, and there was a lot of back and forth. I remember Joey landed a haymaker, and his watch went flying off, and I think got broken. It was a nice watch. And he knocked the guy out. Now, what's a haymaker? That's a punch delivered with great force, especially one that results in a knockout. Anyway, that's the fights that I survived, and some words to describe them. I'm still standing. Well, right now I'm sitting, but I'm still standing after all these years. None the worse for those kerfuffles and imbroglios that I got into way back when. So we studied fighting words today, fighting words, by following me from Hackett Elementary to Penn Treaty Junior High to Central and Frankfurt High Schools. But also because Kensington was a rough place to grow up. The fights happened there. I didn't really have any fights in Stone Harbor. I don't remember any. And now you know why I walk gingerly through my old neighborhood. So what are the words we looked at today? We looked at an imbroglio. We looked at the beatdowns. We looked at a hullabaloo. And we looked at kerfuffle, wallop, we looked at brouhaha, clobber, pugilist, dust up, bludgeon, skirmish, Donnybrook, brawl, and finally a haymaker, the knockout punch. So next up, the final video, video 5, and that's going to be funny and ethnic words, and then we're going to recap the entire series. See you then, guys. Peace out.